In the last video, we met our protagonist, who lived with her ex-convict father in the slums. Her financial situation was not good, and her father kept demanding money from her. And one day, she fell from the roof as she was trying to move away from her father, who wanted to hit her. She died, and she hoped that her sad life would end peacefully. But instead of that, she was born in a fantasy world as Mabel, the second child of Emperor Esteban of Hermano. She also had a brother named Oscar, who was about 6 years old. Both Esteban and Oscar are very fond of Mabel, and they try their best to meet her as much as they can. But our protagonist is traumatized by her past experiences with her family, and she cannot accept them just yet. She tries to act cold, but as a 1-month-old child, she can only babble and be misunderstood by everyone. There was also a prophecy at the time of Mabel's birth. At the end of the East, the seed to save the world has been planted, and the Holy Kingdom of Abelardo has reasons to believe that the seed mentioned in the prophecy is Mabel. Thus, they keep on asking Emperor Esteban to hand over his daughter to them, and he sternly refuses. Mabel's life goes on as a cherished child, and the only people she meets are her father, her brother, her nanny, and the servants Larima and Xavier. On the day of Mabel's first walk, she is taken to a nearby forest area. There, Xavier exclaims that he saw the divine beast that hatched on the same day as Mabel's birthday, and Mabel wants to see the cat with golden fur she has heard about. And since Oscar was about to leave her behind, Mabel suddenly meows, and only later did she realize how out of place it was for a 2-month-old child to speak. But that results in her meeting the golden cat. Its fur makes Mabel sneeze, and the cat runs away, and Mabel's convoy has to return to the palace. Now Mabel, her servants, and Oscar have reached the palace. Oscar says that he was not sure if Mabel was really feeling cold, but the nanny thinks that it was the reason she sneezed. As they are talking about how she has been outside for too long, Oscar stops mid-sentence as he sees someone. Mabel is also surprised. Oscar was acting like he saw something he shouldn't have. And then she also sees a tall woman with sharp green eyes. The nanny greets the woman as Duke Donovan, and Oscar seems to be afraid of her. Mabel had heard that name a lot, but she was trying to remember who that woman was. And as the nanny says that she was Oscar's mother, Mabel also remembers her. She was Pacifica Donovan, Oscar's biological mother, and she is also known as the Iron-Blooded Duke. Emperor Esteban had married twice. The first marriage with Pacifica was a marriage of convenience, and they divorced shortly after Oscar was born. And after that, Pacifica Donovan became the Duke after facing numerous challenges. Esteban then married Mabel's biological mother, Siana Gardenia. This time, he married because they both loved each other. But Siana died shortly after giving birth to Mabel. Right now, Oscar tells the nanny that his mother is scary. Mabel is surprised. Oscar acts brazenly in front of the emperor, and even he was scared of this woman. And since Mabel was the child of Pacifica's husband's second wife, she thinks that she must be wary of her. Instead of going to greet his mother, Oscar takes Mabel's stroller and starts taking her to her room. And Mabel is relieved that Pacifica cannot see her, and that she is able to get out of here quickly. As soon as she is out of sight, both siblings are relieved. But then there is another thing that concerns them. The guards are fighting someone, and they are screaming that it is dangerous here. Mabel wonders what it was this time, and she looks at the gate where a fight was going on. The knights were panicking, and even Oscar and Nanny were anxious. As Mabel looks carefully, she finds that the knights looked like they were in terrible shape, and she wonders what the reason behind this is. And then she sees a boy clad in all black with dark magic emanating from him. She realizes that a child was the reason that the knights were on the edge. And as the knights are trying to capture him, the boy easily breaches their defense and injures them. But then, suddenly, his eyes meet Mabel's. Mabel thinks that the moment their eyes met, it felt like they were the only people there. She felt a strange sensation she could not describe. Oscar is also nervous, and he tells the nanny that they should also go back. She agrees, and they hurry away with Mabel. But the boy in all black suddenly collapses, and the knights are able to capture him. Mabel is confused about what just happened, but even without knowing anything, she could tell from Oscar's reaction that things were still serious at the gate. At the royal palace, a knight tells Esteban's aide about the Devlin's devil going berserk at the gate. He was being moved to an underground prison when he used all of his strength to rebel. The aide, a man named Gustav, thinks that this thing was within their expectations. The thing that worried him more was that Devlin's devil almost ran into Mabel on her first walk, and he is anxious as he asks the knight if the princess is completely safe. And he is sure that even if nothing had happened, the emperor would not be happy to learn that his daughter was so near danger. The knight tells Gustav that the devil lost consciousness as soon as he saw the princess. The knight thinks that it was because he used too much of his power and got exhausted. Gustav accepts that explanation and goes to report the situation. He is quite nervous as he enters the emperor's office, and he is glad that Esteban is still handling the paperwork quietly. Esteban asks Gustav what the matter is, and he wonders where he should start. He wanted to make sure that he was not in danger. He tells the emperor that there was a report about the princess, and as Esteban stares at him, Gustav thinks that he knew that this would be his reaction. He starts talking about how the princess saw Devlin's devil, but he speaks faster and louder as soon as he reaches that point. He says that they were quite far away and just made eye contact. There was nothing else that happened. And Esteban calmly says that he understands. Gustav thinks that it is fortunate that he was safer than he expected to be. And then he says that he heard that the princess said meow. And at these words, Esteban loses his temper. The teacup in his hand shatters, and Gustav thinks that it was so expensive. And then Esteban asks him to repeat what he just said. Gustav is afraid of the energy the emperor is releasing, but he follows his orders. He repeats the incident about Devlin's devil coming near the princess, but that is not what Esteban wants to hear. Gustav then says that he heard that the princess said meow, and Esteban releases another wave of destructive energy. And that energy breaks the ceramic vase next to the broken teacup. Gustav is appalled. The vase was a national treasure that was over 1,000 years old. And as Gustav pays his respects to the broken ceramic vase, he wonders what was wrong with the emperor. But then the emperor gets up and says that he needs to see Mabel at once. Gustav wonders if Esteban is so angry because he could not hear his daughter's first words. He was acting like meeting a dangerous terrorist was no big deal. Esteban asks Gustav to follow him to Mabel's room, and now Gustav wonders if hearing the princess meow was so important for the emperor. But he knows better than to criticize him if he wants to keep his job. Inside Mabel's chamber, she is feeling hot. And the reason behind this is that her nanny and her servants are trying to make the room hotter. She just sneezed once, but now they have covered her in a blanket and were opening the curtains for sunlight to get in. And she cannot even cry because then her nanny will say that she is hungry again. Mabel thinks that it is better to be quiet and obedient. It will be over soon, as the temperature in the palace was constant. But then Mabel starts to think about the red-eyed boy she met earlier. The strange feeling she felt upon seeing him was still with her, and it was bothering her. Just then, Esteban enters her room, and he asks Mabel if she had a good walk. She wonders why he came again, even though they met a little while ago. Esteban lifts her up, and the nanny tells him that she just finished eating. He also inquires about why Mabel was sweating, and the nanny explains that she sneezed earlier, so they were trying to keep her warm. Esteban is not satisfied with that and asks the nanny about the new toy and if she has conducted the toxicity tests for it. Mabel wonders why her father suddenly came and started creating problems for everyone, and she wants to help the nanny get out of this situation. So Mabel meows in front of Esteban, and that is exactly what he wanted. He exclaims that Gustav was right, and Mabel meows again. She is thinking that she is just a normal baby, and all she can say is meow. Esteban laughs and asks her if she likes saying meow that much. Gustav and the nanny are also relieved now that the emperor's mood is better. Mabel thinks that she has no other choice but to keep saying meow because she has decided that. It was the only way to stop people from thinking that she was a genius. Esteban also realizes that Mabel liked to say meow, but he is disappointed because he wanted her first words to be papa. And Mabel thinks that he was saying the same thing as Oscar. But then Esteban suddenly tells Mabel that if she likes cats so much, he will give her the forest to the north of the imperial palace where the golden cat lives. Esteban asks Gustav if he heard what he said, and the latter notes the imperial decree in his notebook. The ownership of the forest was to be transferred to Mabel, who is shocked to learn this. She thinks that it was too much. She thinks that the emperor is out of his mind. Who would think of giving a forest to a 2-year-old child? And Esteban also realizes that Mabel does not like the gift. He asks Gustav for his opinion, and Mabel hopes that he can tell him the correct thing. But Gustav is also like the Emperor in understanding what babies want. He says that Mabel might not like the forest because the landscape is not so good. It was nothing compared to the imperial villas built around the forest. And Esteban thinks that it makes sense. Mabel has given up now. She wonders how they can think that a baby will know about landscaping. But Esteban has already decided what he will give Mabel to make her happy. He will gift her the Ponce Castle along with the ownership of the North Forest. Mabel is annoyed, and she is sure that the Emperor is out of his mind. Time passed swiftly after that, and now Mabel is 3 months old. There is a group of guests visiting the Empire today, and they are the priests of the Holy Kingdom of Abelardo. The head of the priests cheerfully greets Esteban, but he is not glad to see him. He thinks of the priests as leeches and wonders why they came here. All the letters they sent him earlier were burned, and they cunningly and shamelessly came here in person. The priest says that Esteban must have been surprised by the sudden visit, and as Esteban replies that he is thrilled to have them as guests, Gustav is already terrified of this meeting. Esteban says that he heard the priests were here to exchange information about their new research, but he is only thinking how he wants them to go away as quickly as possible. The head priest says that he was working hard on his research for the sake of both kingdoms, and Esteban says that it was enough and that they should return now. But before that, the priest wants to say something about the princess. He calls her Mabel Winter Gardenia Hermano, and Esteban tells him to correct himself by removing the word winter from her name. Winter was the name that came with the prophecy. When Mabel was born, the Holy Kingdom announced another name for her, and they referred to her by that name. But Esteban does not like that, and he tells the priests that he does not accept Abelardo's prophecy. He asks how they can be sure that the person being talked about in the prophecy was Mabel. But he knows the prophecy says that the seeds to save the world have been planted at the end of the East. Hermano was on the easternmost side of the continent, and the lightning that hit the imperial palace when Mabel was born was also part of the proof. Esteban wants to dismiss both things as pure coincidence, and the priest already knows that the Emperor is going to say this. Esteban is furious, and Gustav is afraid of what he might do. He used to feel very relaxed when Esteban's temper cooled down after marrying Siana, but it seemed that he could return to how he was before right now. Esteban asks the priests if they want him to send his newborn daughter to a foreign kingdom because of an uncertain prophecy, and in response, the priest delivers a gift from their emperor to Esteban. He says that Esteban will know once he sees the gift. Esteban was wondering what the gift would be that Abelardo would use to ask for his daughter. But he is surprised to see that the gift was the pendant of the late Emperor Hermano. When Esteban's father competed for the throne with other candidates, he received the help of the Holy Kingdom, and he gave them his pendant as proof that he owed them a great favor. Esteban says that his daughter has to pay the debts of the late emperor, and he could not find this acceptable. The priest says that this was not the intention of Abelardo. Esteban asks him if they weren't trying to get him to sell his daughter to them by reminding him of the favor. The head priest says that their emperor only wants to protect the person mentioned in the prophecy, and they also know that they could not take Mabel away immediately and that their request was undoubtedly excessive. Esteban is surprised upon hearing these words. He thinks that the priests were giving up quicker than he thought, but he still can't guess what was going on in their heads, so he is uneasy. The priest says that since Esteban was refusing so firmly, they would back down right now. But for that, they wanted him to accept another one of their requests. They would like to meet Princess Mabel. Esteban realizes that this was their real purpose all along. He wants to refuse, but since the debt that the former emperor owed had been brought into the discussion, he could not do that. He agrees, but there are some conditions. The priests are happy to hear that their request has been approved, and the head priest asks what the request was. Esteban says that he will also be present at the meeting. The priests had to stay at least 20 meters away from Mabel, and obviously there would be no physical contact. Magic and divine powers were also prohibited. The priests are shocked, but the emperor has one final condition. If Mabel cries, the meeting will stop immediately. The head priest thinks that the emperor was too smart and prudent, and Esteban is thinking that if the priests try to threaten his daughters even a little, he will immediately punish them. Mabel is in her room, and it is quite peaceful. But it is so peaceful that it has become boring. Xavier was not around, and the nanny and Larima were busy. Mabel wonders if this is the right time to secretly practice moving around. Right now, she was lying on her side, and it would be easier for her to flip over. And she wishes that she could flip this time, but even as she tries, she cannot move, and her head feels strangely heavy. Mabel thinks that she should stop right now. If she sweats again, everyone will go crazy thinking that she has a fever like the last time. She will practice again when she is alone at night. Oscar comes to her room, and he asks her if she was waiting for him, but Mabel does not bother to answer him. She wonders why Oscar is still coming to see her even though it has been 3 months. She thought he would get bored eventually and stop coming here. Oscar tells Mabel that he is going to read to her today, and Mabel thinks that it was a good thing. She was getting bored otherwise. She wonders what the book is that Oscar has with him. She thinks that since she is a child, it would be a fairy tale. Oscar starts reading the book from its title. Algor Chekhov argues on the ills of Bordeauxism. Mabel is stunned. Why was Oscar reading such a serious-sounding book to a 3-year-old child? And as he starts reading, Mabel thinks that even Oscar was too young to read books like this. He was barely 6 years old and wonders why someone like him would read this. Mabel is annoyed and wants him to stop. She thinks that this is not good for a baby's growth. She spits out her pacifier, and Oscar is disheartened that his sister did not like the book. And Mabel thinks that there is no 3-month-old child in the world who would enjoy such a book being read to them. Oscar says that he will bring a more interesting book next time, and she thinks that he was being insecure and overcompensating. But she thinks that even if Oscar was a prince, why would they let him read a book like that? It was too much for early education. But then they hear footsteps outside the door, and Mabel meows in surprise. She wonders what the noise was. Normally, it would be Esteban, but something felt different right now. The door opens and Esteban comes in. Behind him are the priests of Abelardo. And as they enter the room and get close to Mabel, she suddenly feels something weird in her body. There was this feeling of suffocation upon seeing them. The head priest exclaims on seeing the princess, and she wonders who these people are. The head priest says that the princess looked very healthy and was full of divine power. But the closer he gets to her, the more nauseous Mabel feels. Esteban stops him from getting any closer and reminds him of the conditions that he has to obey. The head priest says that, of course, he remembers the conditions. But he could not stop himself from going to the main character of the prophecy the oracle told them about. Esteban says that he doesn't think that Mabel was the child of prophecy, but the priest says that she was not awakened yet, but she had infinite divine power. Mabel wonders what they were talking about when they said oracle and prophecy, and she is still feeling nauseous. She is sure that they are talking about her, but she understands nothing. But there is only one thing she is certain of. The nausea was because of them, and it was getting worse because of the priest who was approaching her. She feels something different from him and wonders if that was divine power. Oscar sees that Mabel is uneasy, and he tells her not to be scared. He tells her that the guests were priests from Abelardo. Mabel has heard the name a few times, but she wonders why they were here to see her. Esteban tells the priests that Mabel was uncomfortable and they should stop the meeting here, and the head priest politely accepts his decision. But then he suddenly asks Esteban about the devil's devil, whom they recently took prisoner. The priest says that he had heard that the devil was a skilled fighter who could fight against soldiers even without a weapon. He asks Esteban if their side suffered any damage, and he replies that there were some soldiers who got injured, and on top of that, it was hard to lock up the boy because he destroyed the mana control device. Mabel thinks about the title Devlin's Devil. Initially, she thought it was a funny and childish title, but now she thinks that the boy must be really strong. The priest tells Esteban that the recent trend in Devlin has been alarming, and they are even reaching out to Abelardo. Esteban is shocked upon hearing this, and the priest tells him that no one knew what they were thinking. The priest then warns Esteban that Devlin may try to take their precious weapon back, and for that, the emperor must stay vigilant so that his empire does not suffer. And as the priest leaves, he says that he will see Mabel again, and he adds winter to her name again. As soon as the priests go, Mabel feels at ease. The feeling of nausea has dissipated. She could not feel any hostility in their eyes, and she wonders why she was so uncomfortable then. But Oscar talks to his father and says that the priests from Abelardo retreated too quietly. And Esteban is also thinking the same thing. He does not believe that they would back away so easily. Maybe the Emperor of Abelardo had some other plans. But then Esteban wonders why the head priest suddenly brought up Devlin in their conversation. He plans to look further into that. Mabel is also busy thinking about what Abelardo wants from her, and it seemed like Esteban was desperately blocking them from reaching her. And on the way out, the priest called her Mabel Winter Gardenia Hermano, and Mabel wonders why they put Winter in her name. Oscar also notices her lost in thought, and he tells her that she does not need to know it. And Mabel thinks that it was unfair for her to be the only one who doesn't know about this, even though it was all about her. The night comes, and Mabel has fallen asleep. The nanny and Xavier are still in the room, and they plan to leave quietly so as not to disturb Mabel's sleep. And as soon as they leave, Mabel stops pretending to be asleep. She was alone only at night. Until the last month, her nanny stayed in her room. But since she does not cry like other babies, the nanny was now staying in the next room. And Mabel thinks that it is the perfect time to practice flipping around. She strains herself, but there is no result. And she is dejected because she wants to walk as soon as possible. She was only 3 months old, and moving is hard for her right now. But she feels uncomfortable when her father and brother shower her with their affection. And they don't even know that she thought this. Mabel is certain that if they knew what she was thinking, they would never want her. Neither Esteban would want her as his daughter, nor Oscar would want her to be his sister. Mabel thinks that she was deceiving everyone, and that is why she wants to grow up quickly and get out of this place. But then she hears the sound of a door opening and wonders where it is coming from. She wonders if it was from the nanny's room, but the direction of the sound was different. The wind starts to blow, and Mabel thinks that the window is open. But her nanny would not leave the window open. And as she hears footsteps approaching her, Mabel is anxious. Someone was in her room, and that person was getting closer. Mabel is scared because she cannot even turn to see who it is. She knows that it was neither the Emperor nor Oscar because he used the window to sneak in, and she wonders what his purpose was. While everyone was asleep, someone was sneaking into a baby's room, and she thinks that it does not look well for her. But then the footsteps get closer, and Mabel suddenly feels that something is familiar. It is the same feeling as the one she got from the guests before. The intruder is the head priest, and he asks Mabel if she is awake. She had also expected that he was the one who broke into her room. The priest says that he is here to pick up the princess, and she wonders why he was using honorifics when trying to kidnap a child. Mabel thinks that she needs to call someone to help her immediately. She starts crying, and the priest panics. But Mabel is just acting to cry, and she thinks that the priest will get caught now. He is nervous and tries to calm Mabel down before anyone notices her crying. But Mabel smiles smugly and then starts crying even more loudly. A man hears her crying and he rushes to her room. He tries to open the door, but it is locked. The priest thinks that he has no time to deal with things there, and he wants to leave immediately. He tries to grab Mabel, and she wants him to stop and go away. She thinks that there is nothing she can do with this body, and she doesn't want to be taken away like this. She tries to move desperately and hopes that her body will obey her this time. She requests that her body move and finally flips over. The priest is shocked, and Mabel is suddenly happy that she succeeded in flipping to her belly. She forgets about the fact that she was about to be kidnapped as she is lost in joy. But then Esteban breaks through the door, screaming Mabel's name. She realizes that it was the Emperor's voice. The priest is shocked and takes a few steps backward upon being caught. Mabel thinks that she will survive this time. The priest would not try to kidnap her in front of the Emperor. Esteban is furious, and he asks the priest what he was doing with his daughter. The priest nervously says that he did not do anything. He did not even touch the princess. And Esteban asks him why Mabel was lying on her stomach then. The priest stammers and says that the princess flipped herself. Esteban draws out his sword on hearing this and asks the priest if he really meant what he just said. The priest is ready to swear in God's name. Mabel heard the sword being drawn, and she is anxious now. She thinks that the priest is going to die now, but she does not want that. It was true that he wanted to kidnap her, but he really did not lay even a single finger on her, and she would feel upset if he died like this. Mabel decides to help him just this once, and for that, she will have to flip herself again. As Mabel tries to turn, the priest swears once again that he did not touch her. Mabel can't turn around, and Estevan is furious at the priest. He says that this was a problem. Because of someone like him, he could not see his daughter flip. Estevan is truly enraged, and both Mabel and the priest are stunned at his reasoning. Outside Mabel's room, a lot of people have gathered. One of them says that he checked the barrier every day, and it was a shock that the priest managed to find a hole in it. And another man says that he was so sneaky that no one noticed him. And even the guards failed to notice him, so they will also have to take responsibility for this. Estevan is in his room, and he thinks about how special Mabel's position is. She was the second heir to the Hermano imperial family and the sole successor to the Marquis of Gardenia. The Marquis of Gardenia had many enemies, and Estevan is worried that they would try to kill Mabel for political gain. That is why he put a magic barrier around her room and even strengthened the security around it. But it was a shock that the priest managed to break into the princess's room so easily. Estevan curses the priests of Abelardo. He finds it hard to believe that they created a gap in the magical barrier in such a short period of time, and now he realizes that, from the beginning, their plan was to kidnap Mabel. He says that he should poke the eyes of the culprits. There are knights kneeling in front of him, and they shiver as the emperor says this. The captain of the knights knows that this is a difficult situation. Not only was Mabel the princess, but she was also the child of prophecy. Even though the kidnapping attempt was foiled, the emperor's anger was valid. But it was not worth it to create a diplomatic conflict with the Holy Kingdom. The knights are signaling each other to go and talk the emperor out of his rage, and the captain of the knights has to take up the responsibility. He says that it was too much to punish the culprits this time. He says that he understands Estevan's emotions, but it would be terrible if their diplomatic relations with Abelardo were destroyed. But Estevan says that Mabel cried. The knight is confused, but Estevan explains further. Mabel was not a child who cried often, yet she was afraid when the priest approached her, and she cried. The knight captain thinks that the rumors about the emperor being a sincere father to his daughter are true. The story that he gave her a forest, a castle, and even many precious heirlooms was true, and he did not even allow any of his subordinates to meet her because she was too precious to him. Estevan says that he wanted to rip the priest's limbs off, and he would have done that if Mabel was not in the room. But now that the knight is objecting to the punishment, Estevan tells him to put the case on hold. The priest was to be put in jail, and then they would wait for Abelardo's reaction. And then Estevan goes to the knight captain and says that he will put his faith in him one more time. He says that Mabel needs a bodyguard, a trustworthy person who can stay near her and protect her, and that is why he wants his elite knights to volunteer for this job. The knight captain thinks about this job of being the princess's bodyguard. At first glance, it might look like a golden opportunity, but it was a double-edged sword with extreme responsibility. And if the bodyguard made any mistakes, his life would be forfeit. The knights are all afraid to volunteer, and the emperor is disappointed. But then one knight enters the room, and he volunteers to be Mabel's bodyguard. With this, the video ends. What kind of person will this new bodyguard be, and will he get along with Mabel? What else will happen to her in the coming story? Wait for the next video to find out, but if you have any guesses, tell us in the comment section. And if you enjoyed the video, please like it and subscribe to the channel.